I love you, my babies. These were Christina Marie Riggs' final words, spoken moments before her execution. A mother who for years had been the caretaker of her children, one who promised to love and protect them, now found herself standing in the execution chamber, facing the ultimate punishment for an unimaginable act. A mother turned murderer. Her story became one of the most shocking tragedies in modern criminal history. Christina's journey through a life filled with childhood trauma, deep emotional scars, and overwhelming stress ended in the tragic deaths of her two children. Her last words were not just an apology, but perhaps a plea for peace. After everything she had done, after the unthinkable, did she truly feel remorse? Or was her death the end of a long internal battle she couldn't win? In 1997, in the small town of Sherwood, Arkansas, Christina Marie Riggs reached a breaking point, leading to the tragic deaths of her young children, Justin and Shelby. What followed was a chilling series of events. She administered drugs meant to end her own suffering, but ended the lives of her children instead. The act itself was horrific, made more unsettling by the fact that Christina had planned it, carefully choosing the night she would end their lives and her own. Was this a mother consumed by mental illness, or a woman who simply couldn't take the burden any longer? We'll now look closer at Christina Riggs' journey, from her troubled childhood to her decision that shook the world. Christina Marie Riggs was born on September 2, 1971, in Lawton, Oklahoma. From the outside, her early years appeared to be normal, but beneath the surface, she was already carrying a burden. She grew up in Oklahoma City, where she faced a childhood filled with trauma. At a young age, she became a victim of sexual abuse by a relative, an event that would shape much of her adult life. The profound pain she carried from that time would never fully heal. By the time she was 14, she had turned to substances, including alcohol, cigarettes, and marijuana, as a way of coping and numbing the emotional scars. In her early 20s, her life began to take on new dimensions. In 1991, she became pregnant with her son, Justin. The father of the child disappeared before she even knew she was expecting, leaving Christina to raise her son alone. In 1993, Christina met and married John Riggs. In December 1994, they welcomed a daughter, Shelby Alexis. However, the union was marked by struggle and tension. Christina later claimed John was abusive, particularly toward Justin, leading her to end the marriage shortly afterward. Now a single mother, Christina moved to Sherwood, Arkansas in 1995, where her mother, Carol, lived. Christina thought the move might provide a fresh start, but the pressures of single motherhood, financial struggles, and emotional strain began to take their toll. Christina's career as a nurse initially seemed like a step towards stability. She worked hard, eventually securing a position at a veterans hospital. Her work was demanding, often involving long hours, and while Christina performed her job with dedication, the emotional weight of her responsibilities was immense. It was here that she witnessed the haunting aftermath of the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. The trauma of that experience lingered, weighing heavily on her, and the emotional burden of her work only deepened the isolation she felt. The pressure of balancing a full-time job with the responsibilities of single motherhood, combined with the emotional scars from her past, was proving to be too much. Her stress levels were escalating, and her mental health was visibly deteriorating. Yet, Christina kept her struggles largely hidden, continuing her routine despite the fact that she was falling apart deep inside. By November 1997, Christina's life had reached a breaking point. On November 4th, Christina left her job at the hospital and stole medications, morphine, potassium chloride, and Elavil, a potent antidepressant. These weren't meant for her patients, but for an end to her own suffering and the suffering of her children. Christina picked up her children, Justin, age 5, and Shelby, almost 2, from her mother's house. Carol, her mother, noticed something unsettling about Christina that day, a strange sense of dread in the air. At home, Christina went through the usual motions. She fed the children, played with them, and tucked them into bed. Around 10 o'clock p.m., Christina gave Justin a candy, which was laced with a lethal dose of Elavil. She administered enough to make both children unconscious, then stood by their beds, waiting for the pills to take effect. She watched them sleep, knowing the horrifying decision she had made. But then, Justin awoke, confused and in pain. Christina panicked. The effects of the Elevil were not enough to keep him unconscious, and her plans started to unravel. His chest began to convulse, reacting violently to the potassium chloride she had injected into his veins. In a frantic attempt to calm him, she administered morphine, hoping it would ease his pain, but it didn't work. The pain in Justin's eyes only deepened, and he cried out, "Mom, no, Mom!" His screams were a desperate plea for help that Christina could not answer. In that moment, she took a pillow and pressed it against her son's face. Justin struggled, kicking and scratching, his tiny hands reaching out for anything to grasp. But Christina held the pillow firm, and soon his movements ceased. Justin's cries fell silent. When it was over, Christina turned to her daughter, Shelby. She couldn't bring herself to use the needle again, so she chose to smother Shelby with a pillow, who was still under the effects of the Elevil and barely stirred. With both children dead, Christina carried their bodies to her bed. She placed them side by side, as though tucking them in for the night, and kissed their foreheads, just as she had done countless times before. But this time, they wouldn't wake up. After killing her children, Christina sat in silence. She wrote 3 farewell letters, one to her mother, one to her sister, and one to her ex-husband. In the letter to her mother, Christina explained her fear that her children might be separated after her death, and she wanted them to stay together, even in death. Then Christina swallowed a massive dose of 28 Elevil pills. She injected herself with potassium chloride, hoping it would end her life just as she had ended her children's. She collapsed beside the bed, hoping to join them in death, yet her body didn't respond as expected. She was still alive. It wasn't until the next day, November 5th, that her mother, Carol, began to worry. She went to Christina's apartment and found the horror that awaited her. Her grandchildren were dead, and Christina was barely alive. Carol immediately called 911. Paramedics rushed Christina to Baptist Memorial Hospital, where doctors managed to stabilize her. As Christina lay in the hospital, recovering from her failed suicide attempt, the investigation into the deaths of her children was already underway. Detectives arrived at the scene, where they found syringes, traces of the stolen medications, and Christina's farewell letters, which left no doubt about her intentions. It was clear that this was no accident. When Christina regained consciousness, the police moved quickly. The authorities made the decision to speak with her, despite her family's attempts to block them. In the early hours of November 6th, detectives entered Christina's hospital room. They read her rights, and began questioning her. Within minutes, Christina broke down and confessed in chilling detail. She told them everything: how she had given her children lethal doses of medication, how Justin had woken up in agony, and how she had smothered him before smothering Shelby. She spoke about moving their bodies onto the bed and tucking them in, and explained that she had never thought anyone would understand the pain she was in. In 1998, Christina was charged with 2 counts of capital murder. The prosecution argued that Christina had planned the murders with chilling precision and viewed her children as a burden. The defense argued that she was severely mentally ill and suffering from extreme depression, pointing to her history of abuse and post-traumatic stress from her work in the aftermath of the Oklahoma City bombing as key factors that led to her emotional and mental breakdown. The trial was brief, lasting only a few weeks. After just 55 minutes of deliberation, the jury found Christina guilty of capital murder. During the sentencing phase, Christina herself made it clear that she wanted to die. She refused to present any mitigating evidence and made a startling statement in court. She wanted to die. Christina's decision to waive all appeals and reject clemency shocked many. She even told the court that she was ready to be with her children. On August 18, 1998, Christina Riggs was sentenced to death. She was transferred to the McPherson Unit, Arkansas's female death row, where she would spend the next 2 years awaiting execution. Despite her defense's efforts to delay her execution, Christina refused to fight for her life and waived all her rights to appeal. On May 2, 2000, Christina Riggs was executed by lethal injection. She became the first woman executed in Arkansas since 1845 and the youngest woman executed in modern U.S. history at the age of 28. Christina's final moments were a somber affair. She was brought into the death chamber at the Cummins Unit, and after a 15-minute struggle to find a suitable vein for the lethal injection, the procedure began. As the drugs took effect, Christina spoke her final words. "I love you, my babies." It was a stark and painful acknowledgement of the lives she had taken. Christina Marie Riggs was pronounced dead at 9:28 p.m., leaving behind a legacy of tragedy and a nation divided on the true nature of her crime. Christina Riggs' case remains one of the most haunting and controversial in recent memory. Her crimes shattered hearts and left a community reeling, but the story behind those actions is filled with complexity and unanswered questions. Was Christina a cold-blooded killer? Or was she a woman who was pushed to the edge by years of unhealed trauma, mental illness, and overwhelming stress? The public response to Christina's case was sharply divided. Some argued that she was a victim of circumstances beyond her control, a woman who suffered from untreated mental illness and the scars of a broken past. Others saw her as a clear example of a mother who willingly chose to end the lives of her children, driven not by a mental breakdown, but by the burden of raising them. In the end, Christina's story serves as a tragic reminder of the importance of mental health awareness, the consequences of untreated trauma, and the devastating impact of isolation. It raises difficult questions about accountability, punishment, and the potential for redemption. Was justice truly served, or was Christina Riggs just another casualty of a broken system that couldn't save her from herself? Christina's final words, spoken as she lay in the death chamber, will continue to provoke debate for years to come.